Uh, it's such a pleasure to be here on a special, Sunday, especially on a Father's Day. So for the fathers, but if you're not, like you said, maybe in a past life you had a father and you were a father. So that's, a really, um, it is actually a pretty good mission, to be parents. Today's topic that when Abigail asked me, do you want to join us for a Sunday talk? And I always like to ask, do you have, a topic? Because we do have plenty talks already, like ready, but it's always good to have new topics. So she gave me a few options and then I pick one. And once I picked that one, I was like, why on earth did I pick this topic? Which it is animosities and enemies. And then as I was thinking about, it is a hard topic because the reality is you gotta look within yourself first so you can fully understand and then, bring the message. And we all bring experiences, whether from this life or past lives. And that shapes who we are today and who we will be tomorrow. So I do have notes here, so just bear with me because I have notes in two different formats and I kind of want to follow them together. So I would like to start asking you guys. And I don't know how it works here, but I really love when we do have, exchange of ideas, meaning if I ask you a question and you feel like that you want to say something, as long as it's short so we don't take up a lot of time, if it is allowed, you're more than welcome to do it. If not, whenever I ask you a question, keep in mind so we're all kind of working together. And then my first question would be, have you ever had difficulty forgiving someone? Or found yourself avoiding a person because of hurt, resentment, or disappointment? Yes, right? Because at the end of the day, when we talk about animosities and enemies, we kind of have to go to the root of the problem. So today's, exchange of studies will be so we can understand the causes, so we can kind of learn how to overcome the difficulties through the Spirit's teachings. I have what I'm going to talk today. It is from 3 books: the Spirit's book, the Gospel According to Spiritism, and to be honest, one of my favorites, Heaven and Hell. I see you guys have the study from Heaven and Hell, and when I first studied, like the first time, I was kind of like on the fence, I never knew what it was about. So I was like, oh, do I really want to know about hell and all that? And then as you study, you see that it's the most beautiful book. So if you're not in the study, I invite you to join, the studies that you guys hold on a weekly basis. And with that being said, most of us have experienced hurt, disappointment, resentment, or conflict with other people. Spiritism invites us to see these experiences not as punishment, but as opportunities for spiritual growth. At the end of the day, as a immortal being, we're always invited to evolve, to progress. And what better way to progress, other than being together and every so often going through some humps or, disappointments, but being spiritist. And I think this is, for me, has always been one of the most difficult part. It is that we have to acknowledge our part in the responsibility. Because oftentimes it's easy to blame somebody else, oh, so and so did this to me and now we're not friends anymore, or so and so in my family did this and we were close and now we're not. Spiritism invites us to actually look within and see, okay, what is my share of responsibility for what happens. And moving, from that, question 785 from the Spirit's book. Okay, let me move here. Kardec asks, what is the greatest obstacle to progress? And the answer of the Spirits is pride and selfishness. I'm referring to moral progress since intellectual progress is always occurring. And if we think about, why do we feel the way we feel? If somebody disagrees with us, what is our first instinct? I know for myself, like I already have an answer, but a lot of times things will start of, something just so small, to be honest. But the more you feed into, it gets bigger. The more you nourish. Now, something that was silly is creating roots. But guess where? In your heart. And the more it creates roots, it's more difficult to overcome. So when Kardec asks about the greatest obstacle to human progress, we have to remember, which I will have this one question down the road, but I'm going to mention now. We know that we were created simple and ignorant, meaning we all had the same start, point A. We all are learning, and through our journey, some people learn a little faster than others. And we do believe in reincarnation. That's, what Spiritism is, one of the aspects that is different from other spiritual teachings. But the most important is we do reincarnate, but you get better. We never go back. We may stay still for a while, like, okay, I do not want to move. How many times have you heard, like, in this life, or have you said, oh, I work this on the next life? Because now that we know there is a next, sometimes we may go like, I don't want to deal with this at this moment. But Spiritism will show us that actually the faster we overcome certain bad tendencies and habits, it's actually very beneficial for us. Most conflicts begin because, we want to be right, we feel offended, we expect others to behave according to our wishes. Who here? Mm-hmm. Like, we place our ego above understanding. And then imperfections creates friction, because now imagine, we are placed into a home. When we are born, every single person has their own, history, or, we should say a baggage, like that we all bring. We could use a backpack as an example. We're going for a trip, and now, okay, for this trip, you need this, this, and this, and then that is in our backpack. We come to Earth, now we open that backpack, and we start taking out, oh, this is important. This is there, but we should not really be using right now. But the most important thing is we need to add more positive things into the backpack. Let's not carry potatoes. Have you guys ever heard about the example, kids do in school? Oh, take a potato a whole week with you, and what happens? After a while, it starts to rotten, it starts to smell. It's the same with things that we carry: resentment, hatred, vengeance. We live in a moment where it's so easy to get angry. You just turn on the TV and you can watch the news for 5 minutes, and that can throw you off for the entire day. One of the reasons why I barely watch the news. I do get news here and there, but I do not want to fit that into my, day. It is important to know what's going on around the world and locally, but if you're just, connecting to that, it's not too positive also. In the Gospel According to Spiritism, chapter 12, Be Perfect, um, the Spirit's teachings tell us that the true Spiritist strives to overcome bad tendencies. So, animosities often reveal impatience, vanity, jealousy, pride, intolerance. The conflict becomes a mirror showing us what still needs improvement. We always hear about this, especially with in the therapy field. I would say, it's always like, okay, what is that person is bringing, up to you that you actually need to work, and that is difficult to understand, because a lot of times I get myself thinking, okay, I'm judging this, but I'm judging this person for this, but what actually that I'm seeing that is in me that I need to work, and that's the hard part. Because judging people, it's so easy. We can judge people from the moment they walk in the door, by the way they look, by the way they're dressed, if they're on the phone, if they're not. But that real look, okay, what is it actually that it's, in me that I need to work? And when we look at that, it's way easier to be accountable for, what we need to work on. And then we could use an example like a everyday, if you are working and somebody criticizes you now, especially if it's in public, let's say you are a manager and you have many people under you, and then now you criticize someone in front of everybody. How does that person feel at that moment? Okay, maybe you were right because this, and this is part of the job, but there are ways to do things. Maybe if we call the person in private and say, hey, this is happening, I noticed this, can we make sure that this doesn't happen again? Now we're not exposing the person in front of everybody. That person doesn't feel embarrassed, doesn't feel, like even a hate, Well, listen, I deal with people every day at my work, whether it's customers or people that works for me. Some days I have to take a walk, like a 2-minute walk, like even if it's just around, and then because we already understand that we can't simply explode for, sometimes a minor thing. And that happened last night with me. I got a message from one of my workers, next Friday we have a big day. And then she's like, oh, I will not be able to work Friday. And I will not be in town Friday. So now I'm like, what am I gonna do? I have all this work that needs to be done. My first instinct was, why you didn't tell me before? Why you waited? And then now I was like, okay, hold on. Let's not react. Let's look for a solution for the problem. And then I was like, okay, how is Wednesday? Oh, 2 people I'm sure I can transfer for Wednesday, and then the other person can do the other 2 jobs on Friday. There was the solution. Mm-hmm. It took 2 minutes. But my first instinct was, why, And it's just a simple example. But imagine like, at your house with your husband, wife, kids. We all have these moments. Or like yesterday, I was grocery shopping at Walmart and I saw a man, he was on the phone and he was like losing it. But when I mean losing it, it was ugly. And then at that moment I thought, that man is not well. Because if you're in public and you're saying the things you're saying, you can't be well. So I took a second just to think about, okay, he's not well. So let's stop criticizing, what you're hearing and just think that maybe something really flipped. So we go through this every single day. With Spiritism, we have the tools to help us to overcome. In the chapter 10 from the Gospel According to Spiritism, Blessed are the merciful, the Spirit teaches that hatred and revenge perpetuate suffering. When one offense leads to retaliation, the cycle continues. So the message that David read, the last part where it said, the more you love, the less evil will have access. Let's just, summarize to that. Because love is actually nourishing, and now, okay, evil is here, love is bigger, so it starts to shrink. But if it's the opposite, if we just give attention to evil, love will shrink. And like I said before, we can use even in the families, like who here has brothers and sisters. Mm-hmm. Growing up, it was always a fight because my brother and I had to share a room until I was 18 years old. That was our reality. We had bunk beds. We had one, what do you call, like a small little closet, half for me, half for him. Everything was half of the room, half of the bed. But that taught us how to not only accept each other, but how to live among other people. Nowadays, which is great, okay, I'm not criticizing. Kids have their own space, they have their own bathroom. They don't have to share nothing. They don't have to feel frustrated that they need to use the restroom, somebody's in there. Those little things shape us. Okay, of course, I would love to have my own bedroom so I could continue to have all my little things. My brother told me the other day, I remember you and your Titanic posters, the entire room was Titanic. And, or NSYNC and Hanson, the bands that I liked at the time. And then I was like, that's true. The poor thing had to see that every single day. But it taught us how to live together. I'm bringing this example because I also remembered about, I don't remember his name, but probably like 10 years ago, there was a Mexican guy who was the wealthiest man on earth for that year. Anderson Cooper made an interview with him, and he asked, you are the wealthiest man on earth today, and you still live on the same house that you grew up. And then he asked why. And then he said, I do understand that today I am the wealthiest man on earth, and I do understand that my kids will inherit everything that I built. How will they be able to work together if they actually don't live together? So at my house, my kids share a room, they share bathrooms, and that's when I realized that, my mom and dad, that's all we had because it was only 2 bedrooms, but it is part of, who you are today. And I thought it was so wise that he used that example, because he said, I need my kids to be able to deal with frustration on a daily basis. And I think today this is something that a lot of people, not even us adults, we don't want to get frustrated, but yet we get frustrated. So learning how to, deal with this will always help us. And then when we think about the animosities, enemies, I always feel like the word enemy is so strong, because enemy for me is like someone that, I would want to get out of this earth, let's just say. But none of this started as a big thing. A lot of the things starts small. So there are 2 causes that we're gonna see here from where it started. One from, okay, let me see, I think I moved. So from previous existences, we all have had other lives where, the spirit is the same, but maybe I was John yesterday, and today I'm Jana, and who knows what I'm gonna be in my next incarnation. But the reality is, we all have had past lives, we have a current life, and we will have a future life. That is a fact. Until we become perfect. I don't know how long that's gonna take me. Probably a big, time yet. But we're all together in this. So question 392. Why does the incarnate spirit lose the memory of its past? Because a lot of people will say, oh, but why do we forget then if we have had other, lives? Wouldn't it be better for me to remember so I can actually work on it? God is so loving and merciful that He knows we would not be able to take if we knew really, who we were in the past, because that's the reality. Today, you are your best version. I'm not saying that all of us have been bad, bad, bad. It's about things that we go through. Dr. Alberto Almeida has a book that I really like. I haven't read the entire book, but he has about forgiveness. And he gives an example of, let's say, if somebody cut me off on traffic today, and let's use that as an example. Maybe for me, that will be like a 2. Oh, that's nothing. But maybe for David, will be a 5. He gets angry. But maybe for someone else, will be a 10, to the point that we have road rage. So the way he was talking was about forgiveness and how things happens. The same thing can happen to all of us, and we all will react different. And that is important to think about. Because sometimes people will say something, then you may be thinking, but that's not even that bad. But it is for them. And it is important to acknowledge that. Also, I feel like that not acknowledging other people's feelings, it is a big thing that starts little grudges. Sometimes, we can't. We just are, at our own moment, going through our own stuff that we can't really relate. But it is important that as human beings on a journey together, that we can, also observe that for other people. So the forgiveness, so the answer was, human beings, going back to the question, why does incarnate spirit lose the memory of its past? Human beings cannot and must not know everything. God, out of divine wisdom, wills it to be this way. Without the veil that hides certain things from them, they would be dazzled like one who passes suddenly from the darkness into the light. By forgetting their past, they are more fully themselves in the present. Yeah, because imagine if you look, I always like to use family as an example, why not? But we're all different. We all bring different stories. Today is Father's Day. My stepdad, he raised me since I was 2 years old. He has had a very difficult life. We have our differences that for years was big, but nowadays, as we grow older, okay, some things are important, some things are not. But I was talking to him this week as I was driving here. His mom, his biological mom, passed away during birth. And he never celebrates his birthday, like the day of his birthday. So him and my mom are 3 days apart. So whenever he celebrates his birthday, it's always on my mom's birthday. He refuses to celebrate on his birthday. So we were talking this week because my brother, plans a surprise. And I was like, okay, let me kind of go around and start asking, So he was like, for many years I couldn't talk about it. So he's turning 60, and then he was like, because I always felt guilty that my mom had to die in order for me to live. Can you imagine the feeling of a human being, and not because it's my dad, it can be anyone, that carries that guilt feeling, and it's not his fault. So, because I've been talking to him about this, for the last at least 10 years, so he can be a little more open about. So he's told me for the first time, he said, for the first time I can talk about it. And I understand that God had a bigger purpose for me. And I was like, that's right. I said, and your mom, she accomplished her mission. We don't know. what else would happen, and maybe that was, what was necessary at the time. He was the 10th child.
Wow.
Yes. So why am I saying this? Because when we go back to past existences, when we go back to remembering our past lives, we don't know what we have been. We know what we are today. A pretty good example of how we can actually look within ourselves. I like to use the term, and I came up with this on my own, but maybe it does exist somewhere else. I like to think about like my little dark corners, the ones that I don't want anybody to know. Okay? What does that mean? We all have things, we all have tendencies, moral imperfections that, yes, maybe we're able to mask. Like you can look at me and you have no idea about my little corners, just like I don't, my dark corners, just like I don't know yours. But the moment we acknowledge them, it is a big step, because now they're not that dark anymore. Because whenever you're ready to deal with that problem, you can go turn on the light and, okay, today I'm capable of dealing with this. Maybe yesterday I was not. And when we think about this and we see other people, we have to remember that they go through the same thing. And the past existences will play a big role, but we should not look at that as, everything that has happened was a bad thing. No, we understand that God loves us, and He knows that we're like children when you tell them, don't touch the outlet. But why? Don't touch the outlet. Next thing you know, they go and they put something in the outlet, and what happens? Now they know, oh, I can't do that. And my mom, my aunt, my father, they were trying to tell me. It's the same with God. He let us go through experiences, and a lot of times we have warnings, you should not go this route. And when I say this route is not turning right or left, it could be also during traffic. But overall, deep inside your conscious is telling you, I don't think this is a great idea. But then we instantly, and I say we because I do that. But why? I can do this, I can do that. I did this with the GPS the other day. I always take the same way. I come from Fort Myers, I take, 595, and then I take exit 8 to Turnpike. I know from Turnpike to my boyfriend's house is 10 minutes from the moment I take 8 to his house. And he was sending me to exit 9. And I was like, why are you sending me to exit 9? So I got my GPS, I did this, I didn't see anything red, and I was like, this GPS knows nothing. Yeah, 40 minutes on a place that would take me 9. It was right there. But because I thought I knew best, I did not want to hear many times our guardian angels are doing that. They're helping us. Okay, this happened to you today, but let it cool off. Tomorrow you can work on. Because remember, we're talking about enemies, animosities, how it starts. And once the root is there, it's way more difficult to, cut it. And then we have I brought from the heaven and hell, consequences of holding onto animosity. The reality is we are harming ourselves. Whenever we're holding into ill feelings, and when I say ill feelings, hatred, revenge, resentment, I'm sure we all have had that. Hopefully we're not having as often as maybe in the past, but we all have had that, and as I was going through this, I was thinking about a lot of stuff that I went through in my life, and I was like, there is one particular one that I'm very proud of myself. It took me probably over 30 years to overcome. I'm not 100%, there, but I can say 80%. And 80% is better than 0. It may take an entire life for certain things for us to forgive or to understand why it happened, you know. But the whole thing is, when we hold into that, we are harming ourselves. We're making ourselves sick. Not only that, who are we attracting? We understand that all of the you know, like right now we have many spirits here. I don't see them, but I believe they are here. And just like you and me, they are going through experiences. And you know, as I say something, maybe a name pops up in your mind, or maybe you remember of something. The idea here is not for you to be remembering bad things and now you know you're focusing only on that. No. Okay, it came to mind. Okay, good. What can I do to change? To, you know, to overcome. So suffering was not imposed by God. It was a natural consequence of the feelings they continue to nourish. So whenever we carry these feelings, hatred, revenge, resentment, on Heaven and Hell Part 2, we have many examples of spirits who suffered because of pride, hatred, and resentment. And they described that they continued suffering after that because they remained attached to those feelings. It's not that God, you know, is punishing you. Now you're not in your physical body and you will continue to suffer. No, it's, have you guys seen that photo where you show two people in a bus? They're saying that they're choosing to see different scenarios. One is seeing, you know, a sunny, beautiful day, and the other is seeing like a dark, rainy day. I want to use this example to describe this. As we are in the spiritual world, or even here, you know, what is it that we're choosing to put our efforts and our attention to? So the person we refuse to forgive often occupies more space in our minds than in theirs. Resentment becomes a prison where forgiveness becomes liberation. And then there are, you know, some spiritual consequences. In the Gospel According to Spiritism, chapter 9, Blessed are the meek and peaceful, we will see how anger and hostility disturb our spiritual harmony and attract spirits with similar vibrations. When we cultivate peace, we attract beneficent influences. Sorry, sometimes some words don't, you know. So then, after saying all this, you know, how can we overcome animosities and enemies, you know, now that we understand that things happens for everyone. Maybe we have a little grudge that started, you know, as small and became big. Maybe it was something big from the beginning. You know, we can't rule those things out. Then we remember, you know, about Jesus when he tells us, love your enemy. In reality, you know, loving enemy does not mean that we have to approve harmful behavior, become passive, or accepting abuse. No, Jesus is not inviting us to do that. It means not returning evil for evil, wishing them well, refusing revenge. One of the things that I really love in the Gospel According to Spiritism, there is a passage, I will not remember now, you know, the chapter, but it talks about when, and it's probably in this chapter about loving your enemies. When you truly forgive someone, their harm cannot reach you anymore. Meaning, once you do your part, now it is a 50-50, you know, we have to agree that somebody has to give the first step and then there is a second step. A lot of times you give a first step, the other person gives a second step, and you're able to work on it. A lot of times they don't want to do anything with, and it's okay. Because if you're doing your part, you know, from your heart, being sincere, you're not carrying the bag of potatoes anymore. That's done. Now, for future life, maybe if there is something we need to work on, maybe it will happen. Maybe it will happen even on this lifetime. I'm gonna bring later, when we close, a three-step thing that I feel like that I always think about from the book Heaven and Hell, that helps us, achieve this, exchanging from animosity to, living a happier life. Okay, let's move to the next one. And I completely, okay, here it is. So, forgiveness is one of the greatest expressions of charity. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting, trusting immediately, remaining in harmful situations. Forgiveness means releasing resentment. That's what it is. Once you forgive, you don't forget. If you say, "Oh, I forgot about," no, then you hit your head and maybe you had, that was erased from your mind. But it's not reliving that same situation every single day. This thing that happened to me years ago as a child, that took probably, and it still is ongoing, but I would say clearly 30 years, I would relive some of those moments like constantly, where I would have dreams about it, to the point that when I became spiritist 20 years ago, it was very disturbing, because I would have a recurring dream. Like once I started studying spiritism, I feel like there's something opened up, like a door opened up, and it was not fun. Because I was very young. I did not know anything about spiritism. I did not understand what was happening, So after a few weeks of having those recurring dreams, I made a prayer and I said, I need help. Because now I don't want to even go to sleep, because if I'm going to have the same dream again and I'm going to wake up with that feeling, I don't want this. It ceased for a while. I continued to study, and then I did have, a couple more times throughout this past 20 years. But once I resolved the problem with me, it was done. Because that's the thing, once you're able to work on it, then that doesn't haunt you anymore. It was difficult. I have to say, I did not like to go to sleep for a while, but I had to, because, who survives of, not sleeping? Then we have to pray for those, who, okay. So let me go back here, because I forgot to mention. Okay, so first step, we need to understand the other person. Okay, so to overcome animosities and enemies, we need to understand the other person. So we already spoke, like we're not approving their behavior. We need to understand. Then second, we need to practice forgiveness. And then third, we need to pray for those who hurt us. But we also need to remember that, sometimes we hurt people. As much as I don't like to say that, because I don't want to think that I hurt people, but maybe I do, even if it's not intentional. So prayer transforms the one who prays. It softens anger, bitterness, resentment. So maybe we could do a little exercise when you go home, for the next 7 days. If anybody came up to your mind today, maybe pray about that. But pray sincerely for someone with whom you have conflict, not that they change. Pray that both of you receive peace and understanding. Because remember, this is an exchange. When we hold a grudge, you can be sure that that person, we are connected mentally, through waves, and even though we don't understand. So just a little exercise and maybe see what happens. Who knows? You might be surprised. And then fourth, remember the law of progress. In the Spirit's book, where, as I mentioned before, the question 115, God created all spirits simple and ignorant, destined for perfection. So everyone is learning, everyone is imperfect, including us. This perspective increases compassion and patience. And then to conclude our, topic of this morning, I pick my favorite part from Heaven and Hell. One of, because the first page of Heaven and Hell, like even before the chapter, that one, it's like a poem. For me, that's like a beautiful poem. It's my favorite part, but then this is the second. So in Heaven and Hell, part 1, chapter 7, the penal code of future life. If you guys have not read that, take some time and, maybe don't do it all at once, because I think it is a little big, and it's important that we fully let those information sink in. I myself tend to, if something really hurts and I don't want to deal with, I'm like, I instantly think of something else, and then I'm starting to do something else, So when you're reading something that maybe will touch an area that, we're not used revisiting often, take a little break, do maybe 2 or 3 items at a time. But it's important. And then, so in Heaven and Hell, part 1, chapter 7, the penal code of future life, Kardec presents a series of principles explaining how divine justice works rather than eternal punishment. Spiritism teaches a process of education, responsibility, and moral progress. And then, how the divine justice help us heal animosities. The first 15 items, because it is 18 items total in this penal code for the future life. The first 15 items establish several important principles. So I have some here which is summarized because they are in phrases, but they are: God is perfect, God is perfectly just and good, every action has consequences, happiness or suffering after death is connected to the moral state of the spirit, there are no arbitrary punishments, the source of suffering is our own imperfections, evil thoughts, hatred, pride, selfishness, and resentment create suffering for the spirit. That happens already here. If you think about it, all the thing that is around, evil thoughts, hatred, pride, it is the cause of the ugly in the world today. Goodness, charity, humility, and love create happiness. Every spirit has the opportunity to improve. No one is condemned forever. The future is always open to change through moral transformation. Because again, we're spiritists, so we know we have imperfections. Do I like to eat a lot? Yes. Do I love sweets? Yes. But what I really need to work in this incarnation is not just how I eat so I don't get diabetes in the future, but it's my moral transformation. It's those hard cores, that are rooted, my bad tendencies, that I need to each day work on it. It's like a muscle. You gotta exercise every day. Oh, I went to the gym last week. After a month, I could not walk for 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
But if I continue to do it daily or at least 3 times a week, I'm exercising, I'm making that muscle strong. The muscle that I'm talking now, it's the moral imperfection. If we work on it every day, it's easier to deal with. We're responsible for repairing the consequences of our actions. Divine justice is educational rather than punitive. Suffering serves as means of awakening for growth. The spirit progresses through learning and experience. God's mercy is always available to those who sincerely desire improvement. And then with that being said, I think my time is almost up. So I'm just going to go over the 3 points that they give, which are the last 3 items. How we can actually, overcome. Actually 2, because it's items 16 and 17. So, 3 steps of healing and reconciliation. Because we don't want to have enemies, we don't want to have animosities, right? We want to make sure that we leave this earth, with more friends that will come to our aid when we need than people who are after us for, you ate my last chocolate cake, That would be me with my brother. No, not really. Okay, Kardec explains improvement occurs through 3 stages. First, repentance. The first step to overcome any big problem, remember that we're talking about like literally like experiences with another being, not just yourself, but with another being. So repentance is the awakening of conscious. It is the moment when we recognize I was wrong, I caused suffering, I need to change. Repentance begins transformation, but by itself it's not enough. And then we have expiation, which would be the second step. Expiation is learning through the consequences of our actions. It is not revenge from God. It is the educational process that helps us understand what we have done. Sometimes during this life, we experience difficult relationships, humiliation, losses, challenges. That helps us develop empathy and wisdom. And then the third one is reparation. Reparation is where true healing takes place. It means actively doing good and correcting the harm we caused whenever possible. The Spirit does not merely regret wrongdoing. The Spirit works to restore harmony. So everyday, examples, offering a sincere apology, rebuilding trust through actions, speaking kindly after years of criticism, helping where we once harmed, choosing understanding instead of retaliation. Again, a lot of times, through life, through our experiences with family, friends, co-workers, even in the Spiritist Center, we don't really know why you feel a certain way. I skipped, I guess, at one point 2 questions like, like, have you ever met someone that you instantly love? You met that person within 5 minutes, you're like, I've known this person for my entire life. Like, and then other people, you kind of have, a little like, okay, I met this person, I don't know why, but I don't feel good, I don't feel okay about it. Many times it could be that we have been, together in other experiences. But it's just to show how in life, things happens. Because I have really good friends that at first also, I have actually one of my best friends. I did not really like her when I met her. I was like, I don't like this person. But why? She have never done anything to me. But we were common friends with other friends. And then I was like, okay, I'll give her a chance. Oh, how humble of me, I'll give her a chance. She became the most amazing person in my life. So a lot of times that first impression can't be also ruled as, oh, I don't want to associate with this person. We always need to give that opportunity. That's what I always tell my boyfriend. I say, I give people the benefit of the doubt. I'm not going to judge just because of one feeling or because I heard something from somebody. I want to see with my own eyes. And this is, another important thing. Now moving to our end, we have spoken about a lot of stuff. We might say that Spiritism teaches that enemies are not permanent. Through repentance, expiation, and reparation, today's enemy may become tomorrow's friend, and yesterday's conflict may become one of our greatest opportunities for spiritual growth. Also, when Jesus tells us, loving our enemies, Jesus emphasizes was not merely asking us to tolerate our enemies, but to participate in the divine process of reconciliation and transformation. And for our final reflection, um, you know, we can look at the Spiritist view transforms enemies into teachers. Those who challenge us reveal our weakness, pride, capacity for forgiveness, needs for moral growth. And Jesus did not ask us to love our enemies because it's easy. He asked because it is transformative. The opposite of animosity is not friendship. It's not friendship. The opposite of animosity is understanding. When we understand that every spirit is on a journey of growth, we stop asking, why is this person in my life? And begin asking, what is this relationship teaching me about becoming a better spirit? Because at the end of the day, this is, it's becoming a better spirit. So before leaving today, think of one person whom you still carry resentment. I can maybe think about a couple, Some are, maybe one person is newer, and I do love that. That's the most interesting thing. A lot of times things will happen and you love that person. But something happens that now, it kind of breaks the relationship, whether it's a friendship or, ex-husband or, But in this case, it was somebody that I met that I was like, but I still love this person. We're just not that close anymore. I wish we were. But it's fine, one day we will overcome the difficulty. So ask yourself, what small step can I take this week towards peace? Because every step towards reconciliation is also a step towards our own spiritual liberation. And to end with my final, quote, which is not a spiritist quote, but it's kind of between all that we spoke between the three books. So as I prepared this talk, one thought stayed with me. We do not truly overcome an enemy when they change. We overcome an enemy when hatred no longer finds home within us. So that's the invitation for today. Don't let hatred find home in your heart. Let us work on it. Like I said, sometimes it may take years, but every single day is better than yesterday. And I hope that we all can go home, love our family, love the ones that, maybe they push our buttons, I guess that is the best expression, that we have people that push our buttons, but we also push their buttons. I know I push buttons all the time. Listen, I can be very difficult. But I already understand that, I'm on a journey and we are on this journey together. So that's my invitation for today, for you, for myself, for all the spirits that I cannot see, that we all, go back to our home or, spiritual homes, knowing that in order to overcome an enemy, we cannot change them, but we can change and, in choosing for making, no longer a home in our hearts. Thank you, and I always love to be here with you guys, and for the ones who are also joining us through live on internet. I'm sorry that I was looking this way and not straight to you guys, but thank you.
Thank you so much.